Okay, there we are. So hi again. We are now going to finish up our lesson for the argument breakdown worksheet by talking about counter arguments. All right, and let me make sure I have. Okay, close that one. Okay. So some of you may have heard of counter arguments before. Some of you, this might be new to you. So just take whatever you need to from the lesson here. All right. I'm trying to find the argument breakdown worksheet too, so I can bring that up and show you. Yeah, here we go. Okay. So boop. All right. So this is the thing that we're working on here. I will have to take these notes out because this is the argument breakdown worksheet for everybody. And go ahead and do this and that. Okay. Okay. So here's the section we're looking at now. So what we're looking for are any counter arguments that the author considers. Now, sometimes they don't bring in any counter arguments. And if it's a real argument, there's probably some opposing viewpoint. All right. Sometimes they'll provide evidence for their counter argument. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they respond to the counter argument. And when they do, sometimes they provide evidence. Sometimes they don't. So whatever you see here, enter it in the table. But if there's something that you aren't finding, just write none or N/A to show me that you thought about it and you couldn't find anything, okay? And then we have this question down here. List any counter arguments the author should have addressed but didn't. So this will not be, these will not be in the article, all right? So this is you kind of thinking outside the article, meaning like, I don't know, we're looking at this urban gardening topic, for example. Like, what are some arguments against urban gardening, and did the author present them? All right. So we'll look at that example in a minute because I think I have one in mind that isn't presented. All right. So that's what we're working on here. Let's have a look at our slideshow. All right. So a counter argument is when the author brings in the opposing viewpoint to the claim that they're making. So usually if we're reading something argumentative, the author is taking a side on something that's debatable, right? They're taking a side on a controversial issue. And there's going to be people that disagree with them. And a strong argument is going to acknowledge that other viewpoint, all right? One of the reasons we do this also in English 101 is that in English 102, you'll be writing your own arguments. So you want to be thinking about what makes a strong argument. So an example, if somebody had a claim that all college courses should be online, a counter argument they should address is that some students learn better in face-to-face classrooms. And if they don't address that in their argument, that's going to be a weak point in their argument. And we'll talk about how they can address it also. So why should writers do this? You want to make sure, like the author needs to show that they understand different perspectives. So if you're reading an argument, you want to make sure the author's understanding different perspectives. And when you start writing your own arguments, you want to show that. You're also strengthening the argument, or they are, by addressing the opposition. And it ultimately makes the writing more persuasive and credible. You know, if there's a clear counter argument and the writer doesn't address it, it kind of makes me not trust them very much, right? Like, why are they ignoring this? What are they trying to hide? Okay. So that's why it's important for writers to include counter arguments. So right now you're looking at what the author has written. We're doing that in English 101 and trying to see if they address a counter argument. And then in English 102, you want to make sure you include counter arguments in your argumentative research paper. So how to find them? They really could appear anywhere in the article. So sometimes people put it before the main argument, just kind of getting ready to address the opposition before they even get into their own claim. Sometimes we'll find it in the middle. Sometimes we find it near the end. So it really could pop up anywhere. But what you want to look for, usually words like where they're addressing the other side, right? Some may argue, or critics of this believe, one concern with this claim, so you're looking for where the author acknowledges that not everybody is going to agree with them. And these are just a couple examples of ways that they might do that. But when you find an author starting to acknowledge that there's another side to this argument, and they're bringing that other side in, that's where you want to have your radar up for a counter argument. So let's look at our urban gardening. Now, the original one that we looked at did not have a counter argument, so I added one to it. All right, so urban gardening, yay, it's really good for people, and cities are starting to, start these programs. Okay. So here's a counter argument paragraph that I added. Despite its promising benefits, urban gardening does have its critics, right? So we see that idea, acknowledging that there's critics to this. Some argue that limited space in cities restricts production capacity, making it unlikely that urban gardens alone can significantly reduce food insecurity. So this argument is it's not really going to help food insecurity that much because it just can't produce that much food. While this is true on a large scale, these gardens still provide fresh, nutritious food to local communities and supplement other food sources. So this is the author answering to the opposing viewpoint. So what we want to see is the authors bringing up obvious opposing viewpoints and then responding to it somehow. So sometimes the response is, I acknowledge that that's correct in some way, but here's why I still support my side. Others contend that establishing and maintaining urban gardens can be costly and labor-intensive, particularly in under-resourced areas. So, it just costs a lot of money. However, and let me see, notice that when it moves from the counter-argument to the rebuttal, there's some sort of change of direction transition. While this is true on a large scale, however, community-led initiatives, partnerships with local organizations, and city-supported programs can help alleviate these challenges, making urban gardening more accessible and sustainable. So I think, it's saying that, there are problems with it. It's not going to be perfect, but here's some ways that we can solve those problems. While urban gardens may not solve systemic issues like poverty or inequitable food distribution on their own, they serve as an important step toward local food resilience and community empowerment. Okay, so we see critics, some argue, others contend, right? So we're hearing the other side of the argument, and then the author doesn't just leave it hanging. They come back and say, okay, I see that point. Now, sometimes you can come back and say, no, that's absolutely wrong. So these are more concessions, okay, I see that. But then there could be something where you're pointing out that the argument that the opposing viewpoint is completely wrong. That's another way. All right, so let me find my slideshow. It's right there. Okay, so rebuttals. Some of the things you want to look for, does the writer refute or disprove the counter-argument? So that's what I was just saying. They could say, no, that's wrong, and show that it's wrong. Do they acknowledge it, but offer a reason that they still are making a good point? So I think that's what we saw in those. Yeah, it's not going to solve all food insecurity. Yes, it could be expensive, but here's why it might still work. Or do they ignore opposing viewpoints completely? And if this happens, that's a red flag, all right? So that's why on the ABW, Argument Breakdown Worksheet, I want you to think about, is there something they should have mentioned and they didn't? And one of the reasons I want you to think about this is remember that one of your purposes in reading this article is you're going to be finding a companion article, some other article that you'll be using in your response to reading 2. And if you take note of counter arguments that the author should have addressed but didn't, this might be something that you could look for in your article that you'll be finding. All right, so we just saw this. Urban gardens can't feed an entire city. While they may not solve food insecurity alone, they provide fresh produce and build community resilience, okay? So other people who disagree with me will say this, and here's my answer to them. Okay. Now, eventually, you're going to be evaluating effectiveness of the counter arguments, and this is more of a Unit 4 thing, but we want to ask ourselves, does a writer fairly represent the opposing view? Do they provide a logical and well-supported response? Do they cherry-pick weaker counter-arguments to make their case seem stronger? And just remember, a strong argument will engage with opposing viewpoints rather than avoid them, okay? So again, this is, for the future, for a couple weeks from now when we start evaluating arguments, but just something to think about. So that is what you'll be addressing here. You're going to look at your R2, the reading that you've been working on. You're going to see if that author brings in any counter arguments, and there might be more than one also. So if there's more than one, you can just list them all here. If they present a counter argument, do they acknowledge evidence for that counter argument? And if so, what type of evidence is it? Do they respond to the counter argument? If so, do they have evidence? And again, remember, sometimes they don't have evidence. And is there anything that you feel like they should have included as a counter argument? This is where that red flag was, right? So do they skip over any counter arguments? We want to kind of note that here. Okay. I think I mentioned already these response questions are pretty straightforward. I don't think I need to teach you anything for you to answer these, just a couple sentences for each of these. And again, this is going to help you with the response essay you'll be writing when Unit 3 starts. All right, friends, I hope that helps. If not, let me know and get in touch. I can talk you through some of this. This is a lot of work, and it's kind of hard to do without me there helping you. But if you need help, let me know, and I can talk you through it. All right, have a good one. Bye.